This is a quick question a friend wanted me to put in. He said, with the lunar lander, there's one rocket. How would that land with one rocket when the spacecraft is asymmetric? Like, we haven't seen on Earth a craft landing. I mean, the SpaceX one, they say lands, but that's very symmetrical. So it's a very asymmetric lunar lander. Surely we'd have seen that being tested on Earth, or we'd see things now.
It's jumping, yes. Did you see the movie of First Man, it's called? How he practiced, I mean, in the movie, he practiced landing on this. Okay. And it was jumping like hell, like this. And he said, I will practice until I make it, you know? So it's probably some also human skill involved in there.
Maybe a bit like when they did a manual docking with the ISS.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, this Apollo 11, it's all manual. If you go to Smithsonian, it's shocking. They use the calculator smaller than we use in our... 4
kilobytes memory.
Smaller than we have in our telephones right now. It's all manual.
Yeah.
So now we are heading full on into moon landing denial and all the stupid questions that come along with it. This is an extensive topic and a favourite of flat earth conspirators who like to latch on to every available conspiracy with the same level of intellectual curiosity as they do flat earth. That is to say, they derp their way through it blindly with their fingers in their ears like itinerant 5-year-olds, and Mark is clearly no exception. His question is basically incredulity over the control of a craft he knows nothing about. He knows nothing about flight, about aerodynamics, about physics in general. So obviously that means a craft which he claims is asymmetric while showing that the bulk volume where the centre of mass would be is actually pretty symmetrical, can't fly. Unfortunately, Dr Berdyugina, although making a valid point, uses a poor reference to explain something rather important to Mark, which he appears to be completely oblivious about, despite no doubt claiming to have done his research. The fact that it was a difficult craft to control, and Armstrong spent a long time practicing how to fly it, even famously crashing and narrowly avoiding death during the process. And of course, the effects of gravity are much less on the moon, and with no atmosphere, the overall impact on aerodynamics is quite different than it would be on Earth. But never mind any of that. She mentioned a Hollywood movie, so that's where the Flat Earth Collective will switch off and go into a trance.
And they had when the lunar lander took off, they filmed it. You know that piece of footage? The lunar lander takes off from the moon and they created a film. It was like a 10-second film of it taking off. And my friend asks, who filmed it and who... How did that...
They left probably cameras there, that's fine.
And then went back to get them?
No. Oh, they get through radio, pictures through radio. Yeah.
So in the 1960s, they sent videos, digital videos, back across space.
Well, it's radio. So let's say they can take pictures.
But they only had a 4K memory lunar lander, and now you're saying they had like a 20 megabyte ability to capture video.
Moving on to the shot of the lunar module ascending from the moon, Mark frankly goes full retard. It's hard to pick where to start with the mind-numbing stupidity he crams into just a few seconds. First of all, he thinks that a cameraman would have to film the ascent, as if it couldn't be done remotely. The camera was mounted on the rover and controlled via radio, not exactly a new technology by the time of the lunar missions. Secondly, he seems to be oblivious to the fact that they tried to achieve this shot several times with the Apollo missions and screwed it up because of the delay, until the example they are discussing here, which was taken during Apollo 17, where the commands were sent in advance to the camera to account for the issue, and they finally got it right. Anyone can go look at them all and see the difference between them, as well as the continued footage from Apollo 17 as the camera operator pans back to the lunar surface, where you can see the jerky motion indicating the camera movement is motorised. Thirdly, he thinks a camera sending pictures back via radio transmission must somehow be a digital camera. I can't even begin to find the words for this level of ignorance. It is like listening to a millennial child who has no idea about technology prior to the year 2000. If Mark's way of thinking were accurate, then there would have been no television broadcast during the entirety of the 20th century since its invention and first historic transmissions in the 1920s. Just let that sink in for a minute. Dr Berdyugina patiently corrects him as he continues to stumble and repeat himself, but it just doesn't sink in, and he insists on demonstrating how uneducated and ignorant he is on one of the oldest technologies we have, and again seeds his videos with ironic memes meant to mock the Doctor when it really applies to himself. Yes, Mark, that's right, son.
Also know of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias of illusory superiority.
Yes, this clown actually got to sit down with an astrophysicist and came out with this nonsense with a straight face, and even after the fact believes he made her look foolish. And all the little FE chat trolls and all the big name FE charlatans are patting him on the back for being a complete embarrassment. You really couldn't make this up.
This is a strange one.
Come on, we have pictures from the missions.
But as scientists, we can't take pictures as proof, can we?
I don't know what was the technology, but in 1960s, this is 69, okay? So there were already missions to Venus, Mars, also lunar orbiters existed. They all sent pictures. Pictures from the back of the side of the moon were sent before.
I, as an independent journalist, I can't use pictures as evidence, because we can watch a film, a science fiction film, and they've got great pictures of space.
No,
you know?
no, come on. Pictures is data. Pictures is data. So, of course, you can fake pictures. In our time, 21st century is unique. We fake everything. So, I don't think in 20th... Well, of course, you can fake also all the times, or in 15th centuries as well. But if somebody... I mean, this is unethical, again, yeah? So, I mean, first approach should be like, okay, you have picture, this is data. I look at it.
Yeah.
And if I have questions, I will ask, how did you get this data? Yeah.
Having proven he doesn't have the first idea about radio and television transmission technology from the previous century, he then goes on to try and make another weak argument using yet another lame meme. This time it's the claim that pictures aren't evidence because they can be faked, and Dr Berdyugina corrects him again, explaining that in fact pictures are data. The fact that we can create imagery and art doesn't render live images and photographs completely useless. It is an especial irony that flat earthers try so hard to use this terrible logical fallacy when the closest thing they have to evidence for their belief in an internet meme started by a neo-Nazi plagiarist is photographs and video taken with the Nikon P900. Can you say cherry picking? How about special pleading? Throughout the exchange, Mark throws a whole bunch of ignorant flat earth memes over the top of the audio, continuing the overall trend of proving himself to be a vacuous meme parrot, incapable of employing any original thought or doing any actual research into the great many nonsense claims put forward by YouTubers since the resurgence in flat earth nonsense kicked off.
And the person who claims that this is a data, he has to provide all the materials to prove that this is real data.
That's true. And with the moon mission, they said 2 years ago they've lost all the data. You remember that? They said they've lost all the data. Because some people went to say, oh, can we study the data? Because they had some questions, like I have. And they said, oh, we've lost it all. Can't find it.
This is also, this is another force called government, okay?
Things get a little shady sometimes.
Yes. Sometimes governments want to hide things, we know this. And they can say we lost it instead of sharing them, for instance. I don't know. I looked at pictures of the lunar orbiter, for instance, of the surface of the moon, and there is clearly landing sites there. You can tell me that, oh, that picture was faked, and that's why when you look at the data, the landing site is there. You can tell it's possible, that somebody faked that. But it's also, then, of course, in this case, I can say, all right, some data faked, what can we trust here in this universe?
You would say it's healthy to trust photos and images from bodies like NASA?
What can we trust then,
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, if we question everything,
then we end up crazy, maybe.
We should hold on something, and NASA, I think, safeguard its reputation, I would say, trying very hard. And all of us, all scientists do that. But when the government is involved, I don't know what happens. So that I can imagine that there are forces saying like, we don't want you to share this data,
Sure.
and then the scientists are constrained,
Yeah.
and then you can call it unethical from our outsider point of view. But for those people who work there, this is maybe a threat of life, you know.
Sure, sure.
And so it's a controversial thing.
Yeah, because NASA is a government agency.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah.
I don't know what they hide. I cannot prove or disprove because I'm an outsider.
Sure.
He then moves straight to the next tire complaint from moon landing deniers and naturally can't help but relay the information in a completely dishonest manner. Apparently, NASA claimed to have lost all the data, if Mark is to be believed. There are two issues here. First of all, NASA made no such claim at all. They have all the data and never would make such a stupid claim. Secondly, the only tapes being looked for were those used by the relay stations used during the missions. The originals in this case were the ones located at the relay stations, which would have been where the data was initially received from the moon before being relayed to NASA. However, all of the data was relayed, recorded and transmitted, so no data was actually lost, but the tapes at the relay stations were reused. This is a classic example of the kind of lies that spread like a bad virus amongst conspirators online. One idiot conflates information and makes a meme, and all the rest, like Mark, fall in line like zombies, only too happy to make fools of themselves. And it seems Mark doesn't mind taking the Walter Mitty route of just making a load of shit up as he goes along, telling campfire stories about some unidentified interested party being told directly by NASA that this data loss has occurred. Sure thing, Mark. Totally not just something you pulled out of your ass. We then get an interesting moment where Dr Berdyugina actually shows she has scepticism for the government, the one point you might think that Mark could agree with and be reasonable about. Instead, he cuts the audio when she is in the middle of trying to explain that there has to be a level of discernment involved to determine the veracity of any given data, jumping to a point where he pulls the usual underhanded trick of throwing a question at her designed to get a response he needs, to undermine the point she is trying to make and steer the conversation back to a place where she appears to be blindly believing in NASA, when she is clearly making a quite different point about whether government interference can sometimes pose a problem for groups like NASA and scientists in general. This is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations. Dr Berdyugina again comes across as sincere and very candid with her thoughts, going against the stereotype idiots like Mark have built up for her, but being so immature and indoctrinated, he cannot help but try and turn that to his advantage, and, along with many of the mouth breathers in his comments section, he tries to treat this moment as though it were an own goal for the establishment. It really is quite sickening how disingenuous he is at this moment.
Two questions about the space station. I think a year ago they had some cracked glass on the space station due to space debris. This was put all over the internet and mainstream media, but yet they still did spacewalks a week later. Would you think that's a bit dangerous to do if you're getting the screen cracked by space debris? Surely if you're an astronaut, you'd be like, hey, I'm not going out there next week because my spacesuit, I'm going to die. There's a good chance of dying.
Well, this space debris is being tracked. Not everything is known, but there are telescopes on the ground which tracking this little specks in the space and calculating the orbits. There are catalogs of this space debris, and they are like not homogeneously distributed all over. There are like packs of them, like in that, remember the movie Gravity again, like they say, oh, it's coming, like this is space debris from particular mission, and it's true that they are distributed unevenly. So there are some dangerous times and there are not so dangerous.
So you think they're just brave astronauts?
Oh my God, it's another force. You have to do things, it's your job. And of course, I'm sure the government takes all possible care that people are not damaged there. But if it's a job, you just do your job.
Yeah.
You given the order, you do your job. I think this is
military style. Yeah.
Continuing the incredulity at the idea of space theme, Mark wants to know why they would continue a spacewalk a week after there was a problem with some debris. This question really answers itself, doesn't it? We don't stop doing things forever because of a mishap in most circumstances. Why would the ISS be any different? Dr Berdyugina again patiently explains to Mark that debris is tracked and they have warnings when to expect problems, and assuming there is no warning, life carries on as planned. Pretty simple stuff. Even a child could grasp that one, I'm sure. But not Mark. Not the midlife crisis meme pusher who believes silly woo like the position of planets influence our daily lives. That is too much of a stretch, apparently. Everything she says is completely ignored, and he pushes on asking the same dumb question, implying there is some impending doom that must forever close down all extravehicular activities of astronauts on board the ISS, and any suggestion that they would simply get on with their jobs in an already dangerous environment is considered an admission that such missions are fake. This has to be one of the most irrelevant arguments anyone could try to make, and once again he puts words in her mouth towards the end to try and score more points with the rest of the drones who think like him.
Going on to something a bit interesting here. This is recognised all around the world as the spherical trigonometry of the curvature of the Earth, yeah?
Mm.
So, do you prefer kilometres or miles?
I prefer kilometers.
Okay. So, if we were to look, let's try and make this brighter.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to look 50 kilometres, there should be 195 metres below the curvature. It's 195 metres drop. Does that make sense? So if I walked in a straight line 50 kilometres, I would have dropped.
Okay, because of the curvature.
Because of the curvature of the Earth. This is, how much is that? 195 metres.
Okay.
Yeah? So for 20 kilometres, there will be 31 metres drop.
Okay.
This has been verified through universities and astrophysicists.
Okay.
What if I told you I knew some people who, over 4 years, have done about 50 to 100 experiments, and they can see lighthouses and have done laser tests over between 30 and 60 miles. So like a laser hits a mirror across a long lake, like Lake Constance, near Constance, near here, and seeing things like Chicago skyline from across Lake Michigan from 50 miles away. And they factored in the height of the person and all the maths, and that these people actually cannot find the Earth's curvature.
Finally, we get to the memes that Mark really wants to share, starting with one of the oldest and dumbest flat Earth memes we hear all day, every day on YouTube. The ubiquitous 8 inches per mile squared, we see too far nonsense. First, he claims that this is accepted all around the world as the way to measure curvature. Nope. That is a big fat lie. This is an old surveying approximation technique for estimating apparent drop, only useful up to a fairly short distance in terms of the overall size of the Earth, used by the conman Samuel Rowbotham, then plagiarised by Eric Dubé, and now parroted thoughtlessly by indoctrinated pseudo-intellectuals like Mark. It produces a parabola, assumes an elevation of 0, and does not provide any useful figure for hidden values. So we're off to a predictably ignorant start with this one. He then says, and I quote, "This has been verified through universities and astrophysicists." Really, citation needed. Sure, it can be used as an approximation if done properly, but I would like to know which astrophysicist would waste their time with an old land surveying formula for the Earth when it neither concerns them and is superseded by much more useful and accurate formulas. But really, this reminds me of his earlier attempt to appeal to authority. The way he words himself sounds very childish. The claim is entirely vague, and ultimately it is just a weak fallacy assumed to lend weight to his unproven claims. He continues with tall tales about hundreds of experiments, with no evidence of course, and even goes as low as mentioning the Chicago skyline, another staple flat earth meme that is rooted in lies and dishonesty from flat earthers. Meanwhile, he continues constantly churning out a bunch of memes on screen, based on either pure deception or ignorance, along with stock footage from idiots like Taboo Conspiracy, who personifies the flat earth reliance on shoddy camera footage.
For instance,
I didn't understand what they say.
I have a video here. I just want to show you some tests. So this guy's done some tests. Where are they going to be further on? And there's many. using the P900 camera. Have you heard of this camera? It's 86 times zoom, and it's only come out recently. These people have done tests over 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and they can see torches, mirrors, lasers, where they've done the maths, and it should be 10 meters below the curve or 20 meters below the curve. And this is getting really strange really quickly.
As if it isn't embarrassing enough, he talks about the P900, now a few years old and superseded by the P1000, like it is a mystical new tool that has revealed hitherto unknown revelations in optics, but can't even get the stats of the camera right. He happily parrots dogma and seems completely clueless about photography. He jumps on the "I can see it" bandwagon, repeating the lies they like to tell themselves. No one has seen a torch or a mirror, etc. They have seen light, usually fuzzy blobs of light of one kind or another, and in every case it has been shown that refraction and errors in setup are behind these observations. Lasers refract and diverge, but someone like Mark and the people doing the tests will lie about this and ignore the physics of reality because it doesn't jive with the flat earth religious dogma. In order to achieve the results flat earthers claim, lasers would have to literally be magic, behaving unlike any other electromagnetic wave in the atmosphere. And when someone who actually knows what they are doing does the math on these observations, it is never a mysterious anomaly, just bad math or straight up deception by the flat earthers who made the observations, and willful ignorance of atmospheric effects. Not only have I seen this time and time again from so many flat earth charlatans, but I know from first-hand experience that obstruction is easy to see and unavoidable, both from general experience and, as documented with a P900, in observations I have made in the last couple of years, which are already on my channel. So it becomes even more frustrating to listen to an obvious troll like Mark, who likes to repeat false information so readily.
He's saying here, he's done the maths, I verified some of it, so this should be 21 feet below the curvature. This is only over 7.53 miles, so this is 10 kilometers, let's say. He's factored in the camera height, and there are curvature calculation tools, and he's seeing lasers and mirrors, and there are people I know, especially in America, who are doing loads of these tests, and they can't find this curvature. What would you say to these people?
They have to take into account the height that they stay, which
They
they
are.
stay.
They are.
And the height of the mirrors.
They are. Even if it's 50 centimeters, they're putting that into their calculations.
How do they measure the height of their own height on the Earth? They have to know it very precisely. If they want to measure 20 feet.
Sure. What they do, they're actually generous. So say they set up a tripod at 1 meter. They actually put into the calculations 2 meters.
No, I mean height, like relative height of you because Earth is not really round. Yeah, it has bumps. That's what I mean. How do you take bumps into account?
There's an oil rig one. This one's quite far. This is like 20 kilometers.
Yeah, you have to take the profile of the Earth.
So you're saying saying they're just finding a. So this is really interesting. This is 3 oil rigs, and the furthest one is 26 miles away. You shouldn't be able to see it. I mean, we can say the Earth is flat in some places and more curved in others, but these guys have done so many tests. This is 26 miles away, and the horizon's behind it. Now, they say in mainstream physics, the horizon's 12 miles away. With this new camera, the P900, they're seeing things 20, 30, 40 miles away. And this is getting pretty crazy.
I don't know. This is, again, like, the facts you bring, I don't know what these people are doing, first of all.
Now, Dr Berdyugina does try to address some of the obvious issues with being accurate in terms of measurement. And she clearly spots the problem with the fact that Mark is just making claims which he cannot verify. So to her they are therefore meaningless, but at this point she unfortunately forgets to mention the atmosphere, so her words are twisted by Mark into a straw man, whereby she is invoking an odd-shaped Earth at the observation location. The oil rig video he is sharing is a classic example of the kind of piss-poor camera work we have come to expect from all flat earthers who make these wild claims. It seems that even though we can see too far, it apparently never happens on a clear day when someone has a tripod and a clue how to operate a camera properly. On those rare occasions when we get good clear footage, it always supports the stated shape and size of the Earth. There is much more I could say about the hypocrisy with the "we see too far" nonsense, But let's get back to the interview situation.
They're testing stuff with their eyes because they don't trust the governments, these people.
Oh, Jesus Christ, I don't want even to talk about this, I'm sorry.
Why don't you want to talk about it?
This goes crazy.
But this is science, right? You're a scientist.
No,
you're a scientist.
I don't accept this.
How can you not accept it? It's right in front of you. The oil rig's 21 miles away.
No, I don't. I want to have.
This is a test. It's a scientific test.
Who did this? Can I trust those people who published this picture?
I'm verifying these people. I know these people.
Mark can no longer hold his eagerness to talk complete bollocks in and starts whittering on about not trusting the government. And naturally, Berdyugina, between this and the previous indicators, has finally had it hit home that she's talking to a dumb conspirator and doesn't really want to waste her time anymore. Personally, I can't blame her. As I said in the comment I left on Mark's video, I would have shut him down a lot earlier, and the only reason she didn't is because she isn't familiar with all the meme-based bullshit that Mark is parroting throughout the entire interview. There is no good reason why any professional should have to waste their time listening to a lying, willfully ignorant conspiracy nut who has no clue about anything and is only there to repeat a litany of childish, self-serving bullshit for the purposes of taking the piss and making money out of gullible subscribers. He goes on to claim that an unverified video taken by another conspiracy nut full of fuzzy, shaky images of oil platforms is science. On the one hand, this clown wants to ridicule imagery. On the other hand, as I already pointed out, he wants to claim the shittiest imagery available is scientific. He wants to be like Quantum Eraser and Nathan Oakley and try to tie everyone else down to a strict definition of science, while claiming that any old bullshit a flat earther produces is science, even when it contradicts what the people he looks up to say about science.
Well, okay, but this doesn't tell me anything.
Okay, how about you and I go to the lake one day and we take a P900 camera and I'll show you something really, really fucking crazy.
Well, again, there are forces in the universe, yeah? So there is atmosphere, you have to take refraction into account, you have to take geographical profile of the surface. It's not that, oh, I take a camera. You know, I have these people visiting me sometimes.
But they're not doing it, but they're doing lasers as well. You know there's lasers that cost $2,000?
I know.
And there are people who've done 25 miles, 30 kilometers tests.
I can see mountains 40 kilometers away.
Yeah, but they're high up.
Why do you claim that this is not high up?
Come on, you're smarter than this. Say you have a lake, 30 miles, water's, yeah? And you have a person here firing a laser, and you have a person here with a mirror. And
why do you claim it's on the same...
there should be curvature. With the official size of the Earth, there should be detectable curvature of about 30 meters in some cases, maybe more. And people can't find it.
There are other things to be counted.
Now Mark's emotions are really getting the better of him. His Dunning-Kruger is filling him with unwarranted confidence, and he's ready to contradict himself at every turn by saying whatever it takes to push flat Earth in the face of a real astrophysicist. After he is told quite clearly that him vouching for some random on the internet doesn't mean shit, he quickly loses the veneer of civility he has been struggling to maintain and shows his true colours. He is so hubristic that he actually believes he can use a P900 on some random lake and shake up Dr Berdyugina's world. Out with the usual day-to-day stupidity I experience from flat earthers on YouTube, I honestly don't think I've ever heard anything so fucking ridiculous in my entire life. What you're witnessing here is a charlatan devolving into his true state. Forget any illusion of behaving like a rational adult. Mark wants to put on airs and graces, pretending to be smarter, more articulate and dignified than he really is. But he has shown from the beginning how dishonest he is, how ignorant he is on every single subject raised, how much of an indoctrinated, thoughtless parrot he is for the flat earth meme, and now, when it comes to the crunch, he can no longer maintain his facade. He is full of shit, full of himself, and he has gone full flerfer. Meanwhile, Dr Berdyugina has realised exactly what kind of idiot she is dealing with. A scientifically illiterate, science-denying fraud who is only interested in conspiracy theories. I can only imagine how disappointing it must be to realise you're sitting across from such an emotional, dim-witted clown who has lied to you so he can sit and push all this idiotic bullshit at you.
Not only just claiming, oh, there's no curvature. You have to count shape of this thing where the water is, how it feels, what's the gravity there, what's the gravity there. What is the
gravity there will be the same as the gravity everywhere.
Refraction of the atmosphere.
But okay, there's a test where a guy went back every day and did the same test because
but
of different
is
different atmosphere, different atmospheric haze.
Refraction is on average always the same.
But refraction can't make a human being jump up 30 meters.
You can see light of the sun from below of horizon.
Sure. This is like refraction, I understand this,
yes.
But what they did in one test, he proved that it's not refraction because there was a tree above the person here and you could see the tree and everything. He said, well, where does the refraction start and stop? You know, like a mirage.
Okay, so for me, it's not science if somebody says it.
But there's tests.
We have, in science, we have a system. We don't believe everything what people say or what they measure. They are publishing results in scientific papers. There is always peer review to that. Sure. And if there are questions to the results, they have to provide all the data, all the measurements. And even if it's published, it's not, if it's just somebody published this and somebody repeats it and cannot reproduce it.
This has been repeated. I could show you 50 different people.
In which journal is published?
I could tell you for a fact that mainstream science is really not happy with these people and is shutting them down. And I could tell you another thing for a fact, that governments and government websites are also not happy.
What are you claiming?
I'm just not claiming anything. I'm here to ask questions. No, I don't have any conclusions.
That these results prove that Earth is not curved.
I'm not saying that. I'm not making any claims and I don't have any labels. What I'm saying to you is, this is strange. What do you think?
I think these measurements have to be verified by scientists. It's like claiming
but everyone's a scientist.
UFO. No, not
I disagree.
everyone. We are trained. We are trained as scientists. We are trained with the analytical skills and scientific judgment. Even if we don't know something for sure, we can judge based on the other lots of knowledge of scientific facts.
Okay.
And not everyone can do measurement and say, "Look, I measured this. How do you prove it?" I had one crazy person visiting me, taking pictures of dark places with the flash. And she was claiming there are these little dust particles which she sees on the flash picture. These are UFOs.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay,
but this is the fact.
Sure.
She took a picture of the dust particles, scattered light. But her interpretation was, these are UFOs.
But if 100 different people have done this test with this new camera, 86 times zoom, at lakes, all around the world, peer-to-peer, there's a place peer-to-peer in England, and they're getting the same results of missing curvature, that's scientific method, observable, repeatable, measurable. That's the scientific method. And you replying the word refraction isn't scientific method.
It is?
Now Mark is reaching his crescendo and wants to bury her in as much horse manure as possible before she finally quits. With no filter to his stupidity, he lets rip, shooting himself in the foot with some truly idiotic statements. Apparently, refraction can't raise a person 30 metres, but he actually agrees that the sun, which is massive, certainly more than 30 metres across even in Flerfland, goes below the horizon, a flat earth impossibility, and can be refracted up above it. And damn if that meme he's displaying right at that moment isn't the height of irony. Of course, this is not unique to him. It's actually a product of the flat earth hive mind. They have no compunction in invoking atmospheric effects when it suits them, but always want to deny refraction of the type that blows their idiotic claims out of the water. What's more, even putting aside the example he has agreed to, we can all see for ourselves that the atmosphere can have massive effects on an object, shifting it many hundreds of feet from its original position in the case of a superior mirage. So, to claim that light from an object cannot be made to suggest to an observer that it is in a much higher position is just a straight up lie. He brings up laser tests again, assuming wrongly that lasers aren't affected by the atmosphere. This has been shown in many ways, such as demos by Sly Sparkane and Greatest Sapien, and I've shown before that D. Marble's laser could actually be seen curving over the Puget Sound. But let's not pretend facts matter. This is flat earth science. Pseudoscience, as most would call it. Mark continues his emotional tirade when faced with more sensible objections from Dr Berdyugina regarding the evaluation of evidence, and actually claims that flat earth is being shut down. It is truly cringeworthy by this stage. He couldn't possibly be any more of a parrot if he changed his name to Petey. I can't believe he actually wants to claim that they're being shut down. It's funny how he says that while Mark's own channels like Globebusters, Behind the Learning Curve, Dubious the Anti-Semite, etc. are still active and able to post any old bollocks every day and earn ad revenue and sell merchandise while they're at it. What an Orwellian nightmare. And mainstream science isn't threatened by flat earth unless you mean as a long-term detrimental effect upon the education of children by the current generation of dull-witted YouTube indoctrinated cultists like Mark, Bob, Jeren, all the Nathans, etc., who fell for a shitty meme so hard they actually think it is a good idea to keep their kids out of school and fill their heads with Stone Age nonsense. Other than that, they are just a laughing stock and not even on the radar for most people, least of all serious scientists who actually do real work every day. And no, real work doesn't just mean pointing a camera at something on a hazy day and crying flat earth, or worse, getting some of the best examples of Earth's curvature and completely denying that it's there. Note that Mark likes to try and ridicule the idea of peer review when it is considered a mainstream pursuit, but appeals to the fallacy of argumentum ad populum as though it satisfies the criteria of peer review for all the idiots in Flat Earth Virtual Village. This has been a staple of Flat Earth rhetoric from day one, mind-numbing hypocrisy. And I can't ignore the fact that he specifically mentions peer-to-peer, one of the shittiest examples one could provide of good observation, conducted by a complete fraud who lies about having an academic qualification. This ties back into the point that Dr Berdyugina is trying to make, that not everyone is qualified to properly analyse data and produce objective, meaningful results, and Mark is doing everything he can to prove her right while he blows his own Dunning-Kruger trumpet.
Also know of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias of illusory superiority.
Okay guys, it's that time again. I'm going to end this one here, and we'll continue in part 4, which should be the last in this series. Thanks again for your patience. See you in the next one.